Icy water dripped from my chin, soaking into the collar of my only good shirt, the fabric clinging cold and heavy against my chest. The shock of it took my breath away for a second, but the silence that followed was even colder. My son Brandon stood over me, an empty crystal glass in his hand, his chest heaving with a mixture of rage and performative embarrassment. He looked at me not as a father, but as a stain on his perfect white carpet, a blemish he was desperate to scrub away. Around us, the chatter of his high-net-worth investors had died instantly, replaced by the clinking of silverware on china and uncomfortable shifting in expensive leather chairs. "You are embarrassing me, old man," Brandon hissed, his voice low and venomous, vibrating with the fear that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. "I told you to stay in the basement. I told you not to come up here when I have guests. Look at you. You look like a beggar." I stood there, wiping the water from my eyes with the back of my trembling hand. I did not say a word. I did not scream. I did not strike back. I simply looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the man who was now 32 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than my car used to cost, trying to impress people who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point. Megan, my daughter-in-law, laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the tension. She walked over her heels, clicking on the hardwood floor, and looked down at the plastic bowl I had been holding, the bowl I had dared to bring out of the shadows to ask for a second serving of the leftovers. With a casual flick of her foot, she kicked the empty bowl under the table. "Get back to your hole, William," she said, not even calling me Dad anymore. "And do not come out until we tell you to. You have ruined the mood enough for one night." I looked at them one last time. They saw a 67-year-old man with thinning gray hair wearing a frayed flannel shirt and pants that had been out of style for a decade. They saw a leech. They saw a burden. They saw a senile old fool who was lucky they let him sleep on a cot in the damp, unfinished basement of their Seattle mansion. They had no idea who they were looking at. They did not know that the $4.5 million sitting in the account Brandon used to leverage his loans did not belong to him. They did not know that the trust fund that financed this house, this party, and that glass of water he just threw in my face was controlled by a single signature: mine. They did not know that inside the lining of my old orthopedic shoe was a black titanium debit card with a limit higher than the value of this entire house. I turned around and walked toward the basement door, the water still dripping from my nose. I heard Brandon apologize to his guests, his voice shifting instantly from cruel to charming, blaming my behavior on early onset dementia. I closed the door behind me and locked it. My flight to Zurich leaves in 4 hours. But before I go, I have one last transaction to make. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. To understand why my son threw water on me, you have to understand the hunger. Not a metaphorical hunger, but real physical hunger. For the last 3 months, my life in this house had been reduced to a caloric negotiation. Megan had decided that since I was not contributing to the household expenses financially, I should not be consuming resources excessively. She called it austerity measures. I called it starvation. That evening, the smell of roasted prime rib had wafted down the ventilation shafts into my room since 2 in the afternoon. It was a rich, savory scent, garlic and rosemary and expensive beef fat. My stomach had been growling for hours. My lunch had been a single slice of toast and a cup of lukewarm tea because Megan had locked the pantry before she went to the salon to get her hair done for the party. When the party started upstairs, I listened to the footsteps. I listened to the laughter. I listened to the uncorking of wine bottles that cost $500 apiece. I knew the drill. I was to stay invisible. I was the dirty secret kept under the floorboards. But at 8:30 in the evening, the hunger became a sharp pain in my gut. I thought perhaps if I was quiet, if I was humble, I could slip into the kitchen while everyone was in the dining room and just get a few scraps. Maybe a bone. Maybe the end cut of the roast that nobody wanted. I crept up the stairs. My knees creaked. I hate that sound. It betrays me. I opened the door to the kitchen just a crack. It was empty. The catering staff was out in the main hall serving. I walked in my plastic bowl in hand. On the counter there was a platter of meat that had been brought back from the dining room. Half-eaten steaks, bones with meat still clinging to them. To me it looked like a feast. I reached out my hand, shaking slightly, not from age but from low blood sugar. I just wanted one piece, just one rib. "What do you think you are doing?" The voice stopped me cold. I turned around. Brandon was standing in the doorway leading to the dining room. Behind him, the long table was full of people. I had made a mistake. I thought the sight lines were clear, but I was wrong. Every single investor at that table was looking directly at me. "I just wanted a little more sun," I said, my voice raspy. "I haven't eaten since morning." That was when he snapped. The shame of it. The idea that his billionaire investor persona was being cracked by the reality of his hungry father was too much for his fragile ego. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbed a glass of ice water from the counter, and without a second of hesitation, splashed it directly into my face. The water was freezing. It went up my nose into my eyes. I gasped, sputtering. "You are a parasite," he shouted loud enough for the back row to hear. "I give you a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me. By stealing scraps like a rat, by humiliating me in my own house." I stood there dripping wet, while Megan came in and delivered her kick to my bowl. The indignity of it burned hotter than the shame. I looked at the investors. Men and women in bespoke suits, people who talk about millions as if they were pennies. They looked away. They inspected their fingernails. They adjusted their napkins. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them stood up. They were accomplices in their silence. I turned and walked to the basement door, the water soaking my shirt, making it stick to my skin. I heard Brandon's voice shift gears instantly as the door clicked shut behind me. "So sorry, everyone," he said smoothly. "My father, he is struggling with confusion. We try to keep him comfortable, but sometimes he wanders. It is a tragedy, really. A tragedy. Yes, it was a tragedy, but not the one he thought." I walked down the 12 wooden steps to the basement. The air down here was always damp, smelling of mold and wet concrete. It was an unfinished space. Exposed insulation, pink and fluffy, hung from the ceiling like cotton candy gone wrong. The floor was cold concrete. In the corner was my kingdom. A metal cot with a thin mattress, a folding card table, and a single lamp that flickered if you looked at it wrong. This was where they put William Carter. This was where they put the man who had spent 35 years as a forensic accountant for the IRS. The man who had tracked down assets for the federal government hidden in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. The man who could look at a spreadsheet and tell you exactly where a CEO was hiding his mistress's allowance. They put me in a basement and treated me like a dog because they thought I was a retired clerk with a failed pension. I peeled off the wet shirt and shivered. The cold in Seattle gets into your bones, especially when you are 67. I put on a dry sweater, one with holes in the elbows, and sat down at my folding table. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the one thing they had never bothered to look for because they thought I was too stupid to use it. A laptop. It looked like junk. It was a thick, heavy black brick of a computer, a ThinkPad from 10 years ago with duct tape on the hinge. To Brandon, who prided himself on having the latest ultra-thin tablets, this machine was garbage. He had laughed when I asked to keep it. "Keep your paperweight, Dad," he had said. "Maybe you can use it as a doorstop." I opened the lid. The screen flickered to life. It was not running Windows. It was running a custom Linux distribution encrypted with a 256-bit key. I typed in my password. It was a string of 30 characters, a combination of memories and numbers that no one else on Earth knew. The screen turned black, then green text began to scroll. I bypassed the standard banking interfaces. I did not use apps. I went straight to the back-end access of the Carter Family Trust. I watched the numbers load. $4,522,318.42. I sat back in my creaky metal chair and stared at the number. It was beautiful. It was my life's work. When my wife Sarah died 5 years ago, we sold everything. The big house in Chicago, the vacation cabin, the stocks. I liquidated my entire existence. I knew Brandon was impulsive. I knew he had a gambling spirit and a weakness for flashy things. So I created the trust. I told him I was putting the money in his name to help his startup, to give him credibility with investors. I told him I was retiring with nothing, just a small stipend. He signed the papers without reading them. He saw the millions deposit into the account linked to his company, and his eyes glazed over with greed. He never read the clause on page 42. The clause that designated me, William Carter, not just as a beneficiary, but as the primary grantor with full revocable powers. Technically, the money was his to use, but legally, the money was mine to take back. I had watched him burn through the first $1 million in 2 years. I watched him buy this house in Seattle. I watched him buy the Porsche. I watched him marry Megan, a woman who looked at a credit card limit as a personal challenge. I had stayed silent. I had lived in this basement, eating toast and soup, waiting to see if he would ever grow up, waiting to see if there was any part of me left in him. Tonight, with water dripping from my hair, I had my answer. I typed a command into the terminal. The system queried the bank's server. Access granted. Level 5 administrator. I could have drained it right then. I could have hit enter and watched his world turn to ash while he was still upstairs eating prime rib. But I am a professional. Impulse is for amateurs. Impulse is for people like Brandon. I needed to be precise. I needed to be sure. And I needed to make sure that when I struck, there was no coming back. I closed the laptop and hid it back under the mattress. I needed to hear what they were going to say when the guests left. Information is ammunition, and I was about to go to war. The party wound down around midnight. I heard the heavy front door closing, the murmurs of goodbyes, the engines of luxury cars starting up in the driveway. Then silence. Then the footsteps directly above my head. The master bedroom was directly above the section of the basement where my cot was. The house was old, despite the renovations, and the ventilation ducts were metal. They acted like a primitive intercom system carrying sound with surprising clarity. I stood up on my chair and pressed my ear against the cold metal of the duct. "I cannot believe he did that," Megan was screeching. Her voice was high and tight, the voice she used when she was losing control. "Did you see the look on Mr. Henderson's face?" He looked disgusted, Brandon. Disgusted. "We are trying to raise Series B funding, and your father comes out looking like a zombie from a shelter begging for a bone." I know, Brandon's voice was muffled, but I could hear the stress in it. The glass clinked against a table. He was drinking again. I handled it, didn't I? I told them he was sick. "It is not enough," Megan snapped. "He is a liability, Brandon. A walking, talking liability. And we cannot afford liabilities right now. Not with the crypto crash." My ears perked up. Crypto crash. I knew he was dabbling in speculative markets, but I did not know the extent. "How bad is it?" Megan asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Brandon sighed. It was a long, heavy sound of defeat. "Bad. The leverage positions got liquidated this morning. We are down. Way down. I need cash, Megan. I need liquidity by Monday, or the margin calls are going to start freezing the company accounts." I did the math in my head. If he was margin called, he was not just broke, he was in debt. Deep debt. He was using the trust fund as collateral. How much do we have left in the operating account? Megan asked. Not enough, Brandon said. Maybe 50,000. But the burn rate on this house is 20,000 a month. And the car payments. And your credit cards. Do not blame this on me, Megan hissed. You are the CEO. Fix it. I am trying to fix it, Brandon yelled, then lowered his voice. Look, there is only one asset we have not leveraged yet. The land in Oregon. The lot Dad still has the deed to. I froze. The land. It was a small plot of timberland I had bought 30 years ago. It was the only thing I had kept in my name because it had sentimental value. Sarah and I used to camp there. It is worth maybe 200,000, Brandon said. If we sell it fast, we can cover the margin call and buy a few months. He will never sign it over, Megan said. He is stubborn. He thinks he is going to build a cabin there or some nonsense. He does not have a choice, Brandon said, his voice turning cold. A coldness that matched the water he had thrown on me. We have leverage too. What leverage? Megan asked. The basement, Brandon said. We are charging him 0 rent. We are feeding him. If we kick him out, where does he go? The street. A state facility. You would put him in a state facility? Megan asked. There was a pause. I waited for her to be the voice of reason. I waited for her to say that I was a human being. Do it, she said. My heart stopped. Do it, she repeated. Give him an ultimatum tomorrow. Either he signs the power of attorney over the land and gives us full control, or he gets out. We can rent this basement out. I checked the market. A studio in this neighborhood goes for $1,500 a month. We are losing money by letting him rot down there. $1,500. That was the price of my dignity. That was the price of my fatherhood. He is going to play the victim, Brandon said. Let him play victim at the homeless shelter, Megan replied. I am tired of looking at him. I am tired of smelling him. Get the papers ready tonight. Tomorrow morning we end this. I heard them moving around. I heard the sound of a printer starting up in the home office. They were printing the documents. The power of attorney. The eviction notice. I climbed down from the chair. My legs were steady. My hands were not shaking anymore. The hunger in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, hard knot of resolve. They wanted to play a game of leverage. They thought they held all the cards because they controlled the refrigerator and the door locks. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was helpless. They forgot who taught them how to count. I sat back down at the folding table. I did not turn on the laptop again. I did not need to. The plan was already fully formed in my mind. It was a plan I had designed years ago as a fail-safe, a nuclear option I hoped I would never have to use. It was called Protocol Omega. I looked at my watch. It was 2 a.m. I had 5 hours before they woke up. 5 hours to prepare for the performance of a lifetime. At 7 a.m., I heard the heavy footsteps of my son coming down the stairs. He did not knock. He threw the door open. He was wearing his silk robe, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of crisp white papers in the other. He looked hungover. He looked angry. Wake up, he barked, kicking the leg of my cot. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, pretending to be confused, pretending to be the weak old man he wanted me to be, Brandon. Son, what is it? Is it breakfast time? Cut the act, he said. He threw the papers onto my chest. Read this, or do not read it. I do not care. Just sign it. I picked up the papers. I fumbled for my glasses. My hands shook intentionally. I looked at the header, General Durable Power of Attorney. It would give him the right to sell my property, access my accounts, and make medical decisions for me. It was a death warrant. What is this, son? I asked, my voice trembling. It is insurance papers, he lied. His ability to lie to my face was impressive. It is for your medical coverage. The state requires it. If you do not sign it, they cut off your pills. I do not take pills, Brandon, I said softly. Do not argue with me, he shouted. Just sign the damn papers, Dad, or pack your bags. He pointed up the stairs. Megan and I talked. We cannot support you anymore. Not if you are going to be difficult. If you sign this, we let you stay. We let you eat. If you do not, you are out on the street by noon. Do you understand? The homeless shelters are full, Dad. You will freeze out there. He took a sip of his coffee, watching me looming over me like a towering shadow. He thought he had won. He thought he saw fear in my eyes. What he saw was pity. I picked up the pen. I hovered it over the signature line. Can I have some water first, son? I asked. My throat is dry. He groaned, rolling his eyes. He turned around to walk back up the stairs to get me water. That was the mistake. Never turn your back on the auditor. The moment he turned, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small USB drive I had prepared. I knew he left his desktop computer running upstairs. I knew he was lazy with his passwords. I will get my own water, I said, standing up. Sit down, he yelled, turning back. But I was already moving past him. I was faster than he expected. I stumbled on the stairs, spilling the stack of papers all over the floor. Oh, clumsy me, I cried out, dropping to my knees. You useless old idiot, Brandon shouted, dropping to his knees to gather the papers. Look what you did. You crumpled them. Now I have to print them again. Go print them, son, I said, looking at him with wide, watery eyes. I will wait here. I promise. He glared at me, grabbing the ruined papers. Do not move. Do not touch anything. He stomped up the stairs to the office. I waited 3 seconds. Then I followed him not to the office but to the living room where his laptop sat open on the coffee table. He had been checking the crypto markets before he came down. I slid the USB drive into the side port. A script auto-executed. It was a simple program, a keylogger and a file scraper. It would take 30 seconds to copy his browser cache, his saved passwords, and his financial history. I heard the printer whirring in the office down the hall. 10 seconds. I heard him cursing at the printer jam. 20 seconds. The light on the USB drive flashed blue, then stopped. Done. I pulled the drive out and slipped it into my sock. I sat down on the couch just as Brandon came storming out of the office with a fresh set of papers. I told you to wait in the basement, he screamed. I just wanted to see the sun. Brandon, I said, pointing to the window. It is a nice day. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the basement door. Sign the papers, he said, shoving the pen into my hand. Now. I looked at the paper. I looked at him. I signed. But I did not sign William Carter. I signed a scribble that looked like William Carter but was legally unrecognizable. A forensic handwriting analyst would spot it in a second. To Brandon, it looked like victory. He snatched the papers from me. Finally, he said, You made the right choice, old man. He smiled. It was a shark's smile. Now get downstairs. Megan will bring you some toast later, if you are good. He slammed the door in my face. I heard the lock click. I stood in the darkness of the basement and smiled. I had the data. I had the time. And I had the motivation. I pulled the USB drive from my sock. I pulled the black debit card from my shoe. I went to my cot and packed my single small bag. A change of underwear. My passport. The laptop. I did not need clothes. I could buy clothes. I did not need memories. I had enough bad ones to last a lifetime. I checked my watch. 9 a.m. The banks opened at 10. I waited until I heard the front door open and close. Brandon leaving for his office, which I now knew was a co-working space where he played video games and pretended to be a tycoon. Megan would be in the shower. I picked up a metal coat hanger from the floor. I straightened it out. I slid it into the simple latch lock of the basement door. It popped open in 2 seconds. Security was not their strong suit. I walked up the stairs. The house was quiet. I walked out the front door into the bright Seattle morning. I did not look back. I walked to the end of the driveway and hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "First Union Bank downtown," I said, "and then the airport." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. He saw an old man in shabby clothes. "You got money for the ride, Pops?" he asked. I pulled out a $100 bill from my pocket, the emergency cash I had sewn into my trousers. "Keep the change," I said. We drove away. The game was over. Now it was time for the execution. The water he threw on my face had dried, but the stain was still there. And I was going to wash it clean with a flood they would never see coming. The sun was barely slicing through the high basement windows when the heavy footsteps thudded above my head. It was the specific rhythm of a man who is angry, hungover, and desperate. My son Brandon. I lay still on my cot, staring at the exposed insulation in the ceiling, counting the seconds. I knew he was coming. The ultimatum from the night before hung in the damp air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. The door to the basement flew open, banging against the drywall. Brandon stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light, holding a steaming mug of coffee in one hand and a thick sheaf of legal documents in the other. He did not look like a tech CEO this morning. He looked like a cornered animal. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing the same clothes from the party, disheveled and stained with wine. "Get up," he barked, his voice rough. I sat up slowly, swinging my legs over the side of the metal cot. My joints clicked. I made sure to move with exaggerated slowness, playing the part of the frail old man he needed me to be. "Is it breakfast time, son?" I asked, blinking against the light. "It is decision time," he said, stalking down the stairs. He threw the papers onto my folding table. They landed with a heavy slap. "Sign them." I reached for my glasses, which I kept on a crate beside the bed. I put them on slightly crooked. I looked at the document. It was a general durable power of attorney granting Brandon Carter full control over all assets, real estate, and banking accounts belonging to William Carter. It was a complete surrender. It was financial suicide. "I do not understand, Brandon," I said, my voice trembling just enough. "Why do I need to sign this?" "Because you are incompetent," he snapped, taking a sip of his coffee. "You embarrassed me last night. You proved to everyone that you cannot handle yourself. This just formalizes what we already know. I am taking care of you, Dad. I am taking the burden off your shoulders. Taking care of me." The words tasted like ash. He was taking care of me the way a butcher takes care of a lamb. "I need to read it," I said, reaching for the pages. "You do not need to read it," he said, impatiently checking his smartwatch. "It is standard boilerplate. Just sign on the X. I have a meeting in an hour." I knew he did not have a meeting. I knew he had a date with his bookie or his crypto dealer. But I needed a moment. I needed him out of the room. My eyes darted to the desktop computer sitting on his desk in the corner of the basement. He had moved his old gaming rig down here months ago, claiming it was taking up space upstairs. He thought it was unplugged. He thought it was dead. He did not know I had reconnected the Ethernet cable behind the drywall, but that computer was password protected. I needed his main administrative password, the one he typed into his laptop upstairs. The laptop he had left open on the kitchen island. I had seen it when I went up to use the bathroom earlier. "I need a pen," I said, patting my pockets. He groaned, rolling his eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a Mont Blanc pen, tossing it onto the table. "There. Sign." I picked up the pen. My hand shook. I looked at the coffee mug he had set down on the edge of the table right next to the papers. It was my only weapon. I leaned forward, pretending to squint at the fine print. I let my hand spasm. It was a move I had practiced. A sudden violent jerk of the elbow. My arm hit the mug. Dark, hot liquid exploded across the table. It soaked into the white paper, turning the legal text into a brown, dripping mess. The coffee ran off the edge, splashing onto Brandon's expensive Italian loafers. "You stupid old fool," he screamed, jumping back. "Look what you did!" "Oh my goodness," I cried out, dropping the pen. "I am so clumsy. I am so sorry, Brandon." I tried to wipe the papers with my sleeve, only smearing the liquid further, making the ink run. "Stop touching it," he yelled, swatting my hand away. "You ruined them. You ruined the whole packet." "I am sorry," I repeated, making myself shrink into the chair. "I just wanted to read it." He grabbed the sodden mess of papers and crumpled them into a ball, throwing them on the floor. "Now I have to print them again. Do you know how much toner costs? Do you know how much my time is worth?" He glared at me with pure hatred. "Stay here. Do not move. Do not touch anything else. If you spill one more thing, I will throw you out on the street myself." He turned and stomped up the stairs, his wet shoes squeaking on the wood. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I heard his footsteps in the kitchen above. I heard him cursing as he tried to find more paper. The mask fell from my face. The trembling stopped. The confusion vanished. I stood up and moved with the precision of a man who had raided corporate offices for the federal government. I did not go for the stairs. I went to his old gaming tower in the corner. I knew Brandon. He was lazy. He reused passwords, and he synced everything. I booted the machine. It roared to life. I did not need to guess his password. I pulled a small USB drive from the lining of my sock. It was a bootable drive loaded with a packet sniffer and a keylogger script I had written myself. I plugged it in. I hit F12 during the boot sequence. I was in. The script ran automatically, bypassing the Windows login and mounting the hard drive as a slave volume. I did not want to just access the computer. I wanted to own it. I navigated to the browser cache. I pulled the cookies. I pulled the saved passwords file. And then I found the folder labeled Tax Docs. I opened it. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was not just bad investments. It was criminal. There were PDFs of wire transfers to accounts in Cyprus and Malta. There were invoices from shell companies that did not exist, companies I recognized from my time at the IRS as known fronts for money laundering. He wasn't just losing money on crypto. He was washing money for someone. I saw a transfer for $50,000 dated yesterday. The recipient was Paul Hayes. I knew that name. Paul Hayes was a forger, a man who specialized in creating fake medical records and wills. So that was the plan. It wasn't just the power of attorney. They were buying a diagnosis. They were going to have me declared mentally incompetent with paper trails that looked legitimate. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This was not just greed. This was malice. This was my son paying a criminal to erase my identity while I slept in his basement. I executed the copy command. The progress bar moved across the screen. Copying. 45%. I heard the printer whirring upstairs. Copying. 68%. I heard footsteps coming back toward the kitchen. Copying. 89%. "Come on," I whispered. Copying. 100%. I yanked the USB drive out. I hit the power button, killing the machine instantly. I sat back down at the card table just as the basement door opened. I was hunched over, looking at my hands, shaking slightly. Brandon came down the stairs holding a fresh set of papers. He looked suspicious. He looked around the room. "Why is the computer humming?" he asked. I looked at the dark tower in the corner. "I bumped it," I said, my voice quavering. "I bumped it when I stood up to dry my pants." "I am sorry, son," he sneered. "Just sign the papers, Dad. No more water. No more coffee. Just sign." He placed the fresh documents in front of me. He held the pen out this time, not trusting me to hold it alone. I took the pen. I looked at the signature line. I signed. I wrote William Carter, but I added a tiny, almost invisible dot after the middle initial. It was a mark I had used for 40 years on documents I signed under duress documents that I intended to contest in court. To the untrained eye, it was a speck of dust. To a forensic handwriting expert, it was a scream for help. "There," Brandon said, snatching the papers away. Was that so hard? He checked the signature. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he had just won the lottery. Now he said, slipping the papers into a folder. "Since you are going to be staying here, we need to establish some new rules." "Rules?" I asked. "Austerity measures," he said. "Since we are managing your assets now, we need to cut costs. No more hot water for the basement shower. It is expensive. And regarding food, Megan and I have decided that 3 meals a day is excessive for someone with your sedentary lifestyle." He walked to the corner of the room where a small mini fridge stood. It was where I kept my water and occasional leftovers. He unplugged it. "You can eat when we eat," he said. "If there is extra." He walked to the stairs. "Oh, and Dad," he said, pausing at the door, "do not go out today." I locked the gate. "We do not want you wandering off and getting confused again." He closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. Then I heard something else. I heard him dragging something heavy in front of the door. A chair, perhaps, or a cabinet. He was barricading me in. I sat in the silence of the basement. The damp cold began to creep back in. He thought he had trapped a helpless old man. He thought he had cut off my resources, my food, and my freedom. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the USB drive. He had taken my hot water. He had taken my lunch. But he had just given me the key to his prison cell. I looked at my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. My stomach growled, but my mind was sharp. I was not going to eat his leftovers today. Today I was going to feast. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. He was rushing to file the papers. He was rushing to sell the land. I stood up and walked to the small basement window well. It was high up, narrow, and covered in grime. But it was not barred. They always forget the windows. I stacked the crates. I climbed up. I pushed the glass. It was stuck with paint. I pushed harder, channeling 40 years of discipline and 24 hours of rage. The window gave way with a crack. I pulled myself up, wriggling through the opening into the side yard. The fresh air hit my face, the smell of wet grass and pine. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my knees. I checked my pocket. The drive was there. The black card was in my shoe. I was hungry. But first I had a phone call to make. I walked to the edge of the property where the signal was strongest and pulled out the burner phone I kept taped inside my rain jacket. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. "Leo," I said, when the voice answered. "Bill, I thought you were retired." "I was," I said, watching the house that had become my prison. "But I am afraid I have one last audit to conduct. I need you to activate Protocol Omega." There was a pause on the line, then a low chuckle. "Omega. You are going nuclear, Bill." "They took my lunch, Leo." I said, my voice flat. "Say no more," Leo said. "I will have the papers ready by noon." I hung up. I walked down the street, my head high. I was going to get the best steak in Seattle, and then I was going to burn my son's world to the ground. The silence was the first weapon she used against me. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a machine dying. At 10:15 in the morning, the low hum of the mini-fridge in the corner of the basement sputtered and died. A moment later, the single overhead bulb that cast a sickly yellow light over my cot flickered and went black. I sat in the sudden gloom, listening. I heard the click of heels on the floorboards above my head. Megan. She had found the breaker box. I waited for my eyes to adjust to the gray light filtering through the grime of the high window well. The air in the basement, which was always damp, began to grow heavy and still. Then came the sound of the water pipes groaning. I walked over to the small utility sink in the corner, the only source of water I had down here. I turned the handle. A dry cough of air spat out, followed by a brown trickle, and then nothing. She had cut the water main to the basement. I stood there in the semi-darkness, realizing the cruelty of it. This was not just about saving money. This was about submission. This was about breaking a human being down to his biological needs until he begged for relief. She did not know I had already signed Brandon's papers. Or maybe she did not care. Maybe she wanted to make sure that by the time the ink dried, I was too weak to ever fight back. I heard the door at the top of the stairs open. It did not open all the way, just a crack kept in place by the safety chain. William, her voice drifted down, sweet and poisonous. I hope you are comfortable. Brandon tells me you were being difficult this morning. We decided that utilities are a privilege for contributing members of this household. I said nothing. I sat on the edge of my cot, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the darkness. Are you listening to me? She snapped, losing the facade of sweetness. I am listening, Megan, I rasped, making my voice sound thinner than it was. It is cold down here. It is 55 degrees outside, she said. You will survive. If you want heat, you can sign the transfer deed for the Oregon land. Brandon says the power of attorney might take a few days to process, but if you sign the direct deed transfer today, we can turn the lights back on. Think about it. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. So that was it. They were greedy. The power of attorney was not fast enough. They wanted the land now. They wanted to liquidate the timber assets before the week was out to cover their margin calls. I wrapped my thin wool blanket around my shoulders. I let myself shiver for a moment, feeling the cold seep into the concrete floor. It was a good reminder of why I was doing this. It sharpened my focus, but I was not going to freeze, and I certainly was not going to starve. I waited 20 minutes. I heard Megan walking around upstairs, talking on her phone, planning her day. She was going to brunch with her influencer friends. She would be gone for hours. I went back to the window well. I had replaced the glass pane loosely so it looked secure from the outside but would yield to a firm push. I shoved it open. I climbed out into the side yard again, my movements practiced and efficient. I brushed the dust from my trousers. I put on a windbreaker I had stashed under the porch steps months ago. I pulled a beanie low over my ears. To the casual observer, I looked like any other retiree taking a morning walk in Seattle, perhaps a bit down on his luck, but invisible. I walked 3 blocks to the main avenue and hailed a cab. Take me to the Metropolitan Grill, I said. The driver looked at my clothes. Are you sure, buddy, that place is pricey? I pulled a crisp $50 bill from my pocket. I am sure. The Metropolitan Grill is a cathedral of steak. It is dark wood, brass rails, and waiters in white jackets who know the difference between medium rare and medium. It is a place where deals are made and fortunes are celebrated. When I walked in, the hostess hesitated. She saw the frayed collar of my shirt. She saw the scuffed shoes. Do you have a reservation, sir? She asked, her tone polite but guarding the gate. I do not, I said. But I would like a booth in the back. And I would like your best bottle of Cabernet. She raised an eyebrow, ready to turn me away. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black titanium card. I held it between 2 fingers. It caught the light. It was heavy, cold, and unmistakable. The Centurion card. Invitation only. No limit. Her eyes widened. The shift in her demeanor was instantaneous. It was a physical reaction to wealth. Right this way, Mr. Carter, she said, grabbing a menu. I sat in a plush leather booth hidden from the main floor. I ordered the porterhouse steak dry, aged for 40 days. I ordered the truffle mashed potatoes. I ordered the asparagus with hollandaise sauce. When the food arrived, the smell alone almost made me weep. Hot, savory beef, rich butter. It was the antithesis of the cold, hungry basement. I ate slowly. I savored every bite. I cut the meat into precise squares. I watched the steam rise from the potatoes. I drank the wine, letting the warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the chill of the concrete floor. I watched the other patrons. Men in suits discussing mergers. Women in pearls discussing galas. They thought they were the masters of the universe. I knew better. I knew that half of them were leveraged to the hilt, just like my son. I knew that wealth was not about what you spent, it was about what you controlled. And right now I controlled the fate of the Carter family. I finished the meal. I ordered a coffee and a slice of cheesecake. I took my time. I checked my watch. It was 1 p.m. Megan would be finishing her brunch soon. I paid the bill. The total was $340. I tipped the waiter $200. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said, bowing slightly. I stood up. I went to the restroom and splashed cold water on my face. I ruffled my hair, making it look unkempt. I hunched my shoulders. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving the warmth and the smell of money behind. I took a cab back to the neighborhood, but had him drop me 2 streets away. I walked the rest of the distance, keeping to the shadows. I slipped back into the side yard. I slid through the window well, replacing the glass pane carefully behind me. I was back in the prison. I took off the windbreaker and hid it. I sat on the cot. I was full. My stomach was warm. My mind was clear. But I had to look broken. I rubbed dust onto my face. I messed up my blankets to look like I had been tossing and turning in the cold. I sat with my knees pulled up to my chest, shivering. At 3 p.m. the door opened. Megan was back. She came down the stairs this time. She was wearing a new designer coat, holding a shopping bag. She smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. She looked at me, huddled in the dark. She smiled. "Still cold, William?" she asked. I looked up at her, making my eyes water. "Please, Megan," I whispered. "I am hungry. Just a piece of bread." She laughed. It was a dry sound. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You can go days without food. It is good for you. Cleans out the toxins." She walked over to the mini fridge and opened it just to make sure it was empty. She saw the unplugged cord and nodded, satisfied. "Brandon will be home soon," she said. "He has the deed transfer papers. If you sign them, we will give you a sandwich. Maybe even a cup of soup. If you do not, well." She gestured around the dark, freezing room. "It is going to be a long, cold night." She turned and walked back up the stairs, her heels clicking a rhythm of victory. I watched her go. I felt the steak sitting heavy and satisfying in my stomach. I felt the residual warmth of the fine wine. "You have no idea, Megan," I thought. "You have no idea how long the night is going to be." I laid back on the cot. I closed my eyes. I was not sleeping. I was counting. I was counting the hours until the banks opened on Friday. I was counting the assets I was about to liquidate. I heard Brandon come home an hour later. I heard them laughing in the kitchen. I heard the microwave beeping as they heated up leftovers for themselves. "Let him rot," Brandon said, loud enough for me to hear through the vents. "He will break. He always breaks." I smiled in the darkness. Break. Yes, something was going to break. But it wasn't me. I reached under the mattress and touched the laptop. I had checked the accounts one last time before I went to lunch using the coffee shop Wi-Fi down the street. The transfer protocol was set. The liquidity was staged. Tomorrow was Thursday. I would let them starve me for one more day. I would let them freeze me for one more night. I would let them think they had crushed me into dust. Because when you crush dust, you create a cloud. And when that cloud ignites, it causes an explosion that levels everything in its path. I pulled the blanket tighter. The cold was biting now, but I didn't feel it. I was burning with anticipation. "Enjoy your dinner, son," I whispered to the ceiling. "It is the last meal you will ever eat in this house. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker." Thursday morning broke with a gray, relentless drizzle that matched the color of the concrete walls of my basement prison. I lay on the cot listening to the house wake up. I heard the shower running upstairs. I heard the coffee grinder. The smells of a life I was paying for but was not allowed to touch drifted down through the vents. Today was the day of preparation. Tomorrow would be the day of execution. I waited until I heard the garage door open and close. Brandon's car. Then 20 minutes later, the slam of the front door and the click of heels fading down the driveway. Megan getting into her Uber. They were gone. They were out spending money they did not have, chasing dreams that were about to turn into nightmares. I moved to the window immediately. My body ached from the dampness, but adrenaline is a powerful painkiller. I pushed the glass. It slid open. I scrambled out into the wet grass, the mud staining the knees of my trousers. I did not care. By this time tomorrow, I would be wearing a suit made of Italian silk. I walked to the bus stop, pulling my collar up against the rain. I did not take a cab this time. I needed to be untraceable until the final moment. I took the bus to Discovery Park, the vast, wild expanse of trees and cliffs overlooking the Puget Sound. It was a place for secrets. I walked to the far north end near the lighthouse where the wind whipped off the water, and the tourists rarely ventured on a rainy Thursday. A black sedan was already parked there idling. Leo Katz was leaning against the hood, smoking a cigar that smelled like burning leather. Leo was 70 years old, but he looked like a slab of granite that had learned to wear a trench coat. He was not a corporate lawyer. He was a fixer. We had met 30 years ago during a RICO investigation involving a union boss and 3 missing pension funds. Leo had represented the union. I had represented the IRS. We respected each other because we both knew that the law was just a weapon, and it depended entirely on who was holding the gun. I walked up to him. "You look like hell, Bill," he said, looking at my muddy knees and my unshaven face. "I feel like $1 million, Leo," I replied. "Or rather, 4.5 million. He chuckled and opened the back door of the sedan. "Get in. It is dry inside." We sat in the back seat. It smelled of old leather and expensive tobacco. Leo opened a briefcase on his lap. It was packed with documents. "I have everything you asked for," he said, his voice dropping to a professional growl. He handed me the first stack. "This is the revocation of trust instrument. Since you are the primary grantor and the trust is revocable, you have the unilateral right to dissolve it at any time without beneficiary consent. Brandon thinks he is the trustee, but he is actually just a designated agent. The moment you sign this, his legal authority evaporates. It becomes a pumpkin." I took the pen. It was a heavy fountain pen. I felt the weight of it. This was the sword I would use to cut the cord. I signed. The ink was black and permanent. "Next," Leo said, handing me a second document. "This is the freeze order for all subsidiary accounts. The credit cards, the car leases, the mortgage payments. Everything is auto-debited from the main trust account. Once we file this, the liquidity dries up instantly. The cards will decline. The checks will bounce." I signed again. I thought about Megan's face when her card was declined at the salon. I thought about Brandon trying to buy drinks for his friends. And finally, Leo said, handing me a thick envelope. "The extraction plan." I opened the envelope. Inside was a plane ticket. Swiss International Airlines, Flight LX41, Seattle to Zurich, first class. One way. Departure time 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. "Why Zurich?" Bill Leo asked, watching me closely. "Why not the Caymans? Why not Belize?" "Because I want to see the Alps," I said. and because the banking privacy laws in Switzerland are still the best in the world for what I need to do. I am not running, Leo. I am retiring. Leo nodded. He understood. He reached into the briefcase again and pulled out a burner phone and a thick contract. This is the one that worries me, Bill. This is the armored transport. I looked at the contract. Brink's Security Services. Are you sure you want to do this? Leo asked. You could just wire the money. A swift transfer takes 2 hours. It is clean. It is invisible. Walking into a bank and demanding physical cash demand drafts and bearer bonds. That is theatrical. That is dangerous. It has to be theatrical, I said. I want him to see it. I want the bank manager to see it. I want there to be a physical removal of the assets. If I wire it, Brandon will claim it was a hacking incident. He will claim it was a glitch. He will try to freeze it from his end. But if I walk out of there with the money in a truck, that is undeniable. That is a funeral procession for his lifestyle. Leo sighed and shook his head. You always did like the nuclear option. He pointed to the signature line. The truck will be at the main branch of First Union Bank at 2 p.m. tomorrow. 2 armed guards. They will escort you from the vault to the vehicle and then to the airport tarmac. It is expensive, Bill. $10,000 for the day. Worth every penny I said signing the contract. I handed the papers back to him. File the revocation at 9 a.m. tomorrow, I said. Not a minute sooner. I want the morning to start normal for them. I want Brandon to feel confident when he wakes up. I want him to think he has won. Leo put the papers into his briefcase and snapped the locks shut. It sounded like a gunshot. Done, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He handed it to me. What is this? I asked. A gift, Leo said. For the road. I opened it. Inside was a vintage Omega watch. Stainless steel. Simple. Rugged. Protocol Omega, Leo said, smiling. You called it that for a reason. I took off my cheap plastic digital watch, the one Brandon had bought me at a drugstore for $5, and tossed it onto the floor of the car. I strapped on the Omega. It felt heavy on my wrist. It felt like time was finally mine again. Thank you, Leo, I said. He nodded. Do not miss that flight, Bill. Once you pull this trigger, there is no going back. If you stay, they will come for you. They will try to have you committed. They will try to sue you. They will try to physically stop you. You have to be in the air before the dust settles. I will be on, I promised. I got out of the car. The rain had stopped, but the air was still cold. I watched Leo drive away, the black sedan disappearing into the mist. I was alone again, but I was not helpless. I had the ticket. I had the truck. I had the law. I walked out of the park and found a small cafe. I ordered a coffee and a sandwich. I sat by the window and watched the city. I looked at the Space Needle piercing the gray sky. I had lived in this city for 20 years. I had raised my son here. I had buried my wife here. And tomorrow I was leaving it forever. I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as if the city was already a memory. The streets, the buildings, the people, they were fading. The only thing that was real was the timeline. 24 hours. I finished my coffee. I had one more stop to make before I went back to the basement. I went to a high-end luggage store. I bought a single briefcase. Not a cheap one. A Halliburton aluminum case. Airtight. Waterproof. Indestructible. I am paying cash, I told the clerk, pulling the bills from my hidden stash. I did not want a bag. I wanted a vault I could carry. I took the briefcase and walked back toward the neighborhood. I stopped 2 blocks away and hid the briefcase in a thick hedge of rhododendrons behind a neighbor's fence. I could not bring it into the house. Brandon would see it. I slipped back into the side yard of my son's house. The window well was waiting. I climbed down. I pulled the glass shut. I was back in the damp. Back in the dark. I sat on my cot. I checked my new watch. It was 4 p.m. They would be home soon. They would be expecting me to be broken. They would be expecting me to beg for food. I lay back and closed my eyes. I rehearsed the script in my head. I knew exactly what I was going to say. I knew exactly how I was going to look. I heard the garage door open above me. The vibration of the Porsche engine. Brandon was home. I heard him walking on the floorboards. Heavy, angry. I heard Megan's voice, high and complaining. "Did he sign the deed transfer yet?" she asked. "I am going down there now," Brandon said. "And if he hasn't, I am going to turn off the water to the toilet too. Let him live in his own filth." I opened my eyes in the darkness. "Turn it off, son," I whispered. "Turn it all off. Because tomorrow I am turning off your life." The door at the top of the stairs opened. Dad Brandon shouted down the stairs, "Are you ready to stop being stupid?" I sat up. I put a tremble in my voice. I hunched my shoulders. "I am ready, son," I called back. "I am ready to do whatever you want." It was the truth. But he was asking the wrong question. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., when the armored truck rolled up to the bank curb, he would finally understand the answer. But for now, I let the darkness swallow me one last time. I let the cold bite. I let the hunger gnaw. Because the feast was coming, and I was going to eat alone. The sun was barely skimming the treetops when I woke up on Friday. The basement was cold, but I didn't feel it. I felt a strange electric hum under my skin. Today was the day. The final act of the play I had been writing in my head for 3 days. I sat on the edge of my cot and picked up the manila envelope I had prepared the night before. It was thick, heavy, and impressive. To the untrained eye or the greedy eye, it looked like a treasure map. It contained 20 pages of paper. But not one of them was a deed transfer. Not one of them was a bank authorization. They were old instruction manuals for a toaster I had thrown away 5 years ago, carefully sandwiched between 2 crisp, official-looking cover sheets I had found in Brandon's recycling bin. I had stapled them together with the precision of a government auditor. On the very top sheet, I had written a note in my shaky old man handwriting. "The password for the master account verification is your mother's birthday. But you never remembered it when she was alive. It was the truth. He wouldn't remember. He would try his own birthday. He would try his anniversary with Megan. He would try the date he founded his company. He would lock himself out of the system before he even realized the papers in his hand were garbage." I heard the footsteps upstairs. Rapid, energetic, bouncing. Brandon was awake. The door at the top of the stairs flew open. He didn't stomp down this time. He practically floated. He was wearing a suit I had never seen before, a royal blue bespoke number that hugged his frame paired with Italian loafers that cost more than my first car. He was dressed for the camera. "Rise and shine, Dad," he shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Today is the day, big things happening, huge things." I stood up slowly, clutching the envelope to my chest like it was a shield. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller, more defeated. I let my lower lip tremble. Is it time?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It is time," Brandon said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. He held out his hand, palm up. "Give it to me. The deed, the access codes, everything." I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. I let a single genuine tear of regret for having raised him this way, slide down my cheek. "I signed it," I said, my voice cracking. "It is all there. The Oregon land, the trust control. I just want peace, son. I just want to stay inside where it is warm." He snatched the envelope from my hands. He didn't even look at me. He looked at the package. He weighed it in his hands, feeling the heft of the paper. He tapped it against his palm, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. "Finally," he breathed. "Finally, you did something right." He started to reach for the clasp to open it. My heart hammered against my ribs. If he looked inside, if he saw the diagram of a toaster oven, the charade would end right here on the concrete floor. "Wait," I said quickly, reaching out to touch his sleeve. He recoiled as if I were infectious, brushing his suit jacket where my finger had grazed it. What is it?" "The password," I said, pointing to the envelope. "The bank requires a verbal confirmation code for the wire transfer." I wrote it on the note inside. "It is your mother's birthday." Brandon rolled his eyes, a look of supreme annoyance crossing his face. He tucked the envelope under his arm, abandoning the attempt to open it. He was too impatient. He was too arrogant. "Mom's birthday," he scoffed. "Of course I know Mom's birthday. It's April something. It's in my calendar. I have it handled." He didn't know it. I knew he didn't. He hadn't visited her grave in 3 years. "Now listen," he said, stepping into my personal space looming over me. "I have a production crew coming at noon. We are doing a reveal of the Porsche in the driveway. Drones, lights, the whole works. It is going to be a live stream event. 50,000 viewers." He looked me up and down, his nose wrinkling in disgust. "And look at you. You look like a hobo. I can't have you in the background ruining the aesthetic. My brand is about success, Dad. Not whatever this is." He pointed to the stairs. "Get out." I blinked, feigning confusion. "Out, but you said if I signed I could eat. You said I could have heat." "And you can," he said dismissively, checking his watch. "Tonight, after the crew leaves. But right now I need the house empty. I need the energy to be right. Go to the park, go to the library, go feed the pigeons. I don't care. Just disappear for 8 hours." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He threw it at me. It fluttered through the air and landed in the dust at my feet. "Here, buy yourself a sandwich. Consider it a bonus." I looked at the money. I looked at my son. He was glowing with the anticipation of a victory he hadn't earned and didn't actually have. "Okay, Brandon," I said softly. "I will go." I bent down stiffly and picked up the bill. I put it in my pocket. "Thank you, son." "Just go," he said, turning his back on me and running back up the stairs, clutching the envelope of trash like it was the Holy Grail. "And lock the back gate behind you. I don't want you wandering back in during the stream." I waited until I heard him enter the kitchen. I heard him shouting to Megan, "I got it, we're liquid, tell the dealership to load the truck." I picked up my small bag from under the cot. I checked the USB drive in my pocket. I felt the card in my shoe. I walked up the stairs. I walked out the back door into the gray morning light. I walked to the gate and latched it behind me just as he asked. I walked down the alley, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. I retrieved my aluminum briefcase from the hedge where I had hidden it. I wiped the dew from the metal surface. I checked my watch. It was 9:30. Leo had filed the revocation papers 30 minutes ago. The banking system was currently processing the freeze order. The credit lines were snapping shut one by one, silent and invisible. Brandon was upstairs, holding a toaster manual, waiting for a Porsche he couldn't pay for, preparing to broadcast his humiliation to the world. I walked to the corner and saw the black town car waiting for me. "First Union Bank," I told the driver. "Main branch." I sat back as the car pulled away. I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving the past. And I was taking the future with me. The black town car glided to a silent stop in front of the First Union Bank Tower in downtown Seattle. The building was a monolith of glass and steel, a cathedral to capitalism that cast a long shadow over the wet pavement. I sat in the back seat for a moment, adjusting the cuffs of my frayed flannel shirt. I looked at my reflection in the tinted window. I still looked like a man who slept in a basement. I still looked like a victim. But as I opened the heavy door and stepped onto the sidewalk, I felt the weight of the Halliburton briefcase in my hand, and I knew the transformation was about to begin. I walked through the revolving doors. The air inside was conditioned and smelled of money and floor wax. A security guard, a young man with a bored expression and a uniform that was too tight around the waist, stepped into my path immediately. He saw the mud on my shoes. He saw the stubble on my chin. He made the same calculation everyone else made. "Sir, the public restroom is for customers only," he said, raising a hand to stop me. "The shelter is 3 blocks east." I did not stop. I did not look at his hand. I looked directly into his eyes with the cold, dead stare of a man who used to audit federal prisons for fun. "I am a customer," I said, my voice low and hard. "And if you do not step aside, I will have your badge on my desk before you can blink." He faltered. He saw something in my eyes that did not match my clothes. It was the authority of ownership. He stepped back confused, his hand dropping to his belt. I walked past him. I did not go to the teller line, where the regular people waited to cash their paychecks. I walked straight to the glass wall at the back of the lobby, the wall that separated the common floor from the executive offices. I approached the desk of the executive assistant, a woman named Sarah, who had been working here for 15 years. She was typing furiously. She looked up, annoyed, ready to dismiss the vagrant who had wandered into her airspace. Then she saw my face. "Mr. Carter," she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God. We haven't seen you in years. We thought Brandon said you were—" She trailed off, unable to say the words. Brandon had told them I was invalid. He had told them I was housebound. "Is Mr. Garrison in?" I asked, cutting through her shock. "Yes. But he is in a conference call. I can—" "Get him," I said. "Tell him William Carter is here. Tell him I am activating the revocation clause." She scrambled up from her chair, knocking over a stapler in her haste. She ran to the heavy oak door behind her and burst in. I waited. I stood in the middle of the plush carpet, holding my aluminum case, ignoring the stares of the loan officers in their cubicles. 10 seconds later, the door flew open. Robert Garrison, the branch manager, a man I had known since he was a junior analyst, rushed out. He looked older than I remembered, his hair thinning, his suit expensive but strained at the buttons. He looked at me, and for a second he didn't recognize the man in the dirty windbreaker. Then he saw the watch on my wrist, the vintage Omega. "Bill," he said, breathless. "Come in. Please, come in." I walked into his office. It was soundproof. The city noise disappeared. I placed the aluminum briefcase on his mahogany desk, right on top of a stack of quarterly reports. "Close the door, Robert," I said, "and lock it." He did as he was told. When he turned back, I was already sitting in the leather guest chair. I did not slouch. I did not tremble. I sat with the spine of a soldier. I took off the beanie and threw it in the trash can. I took off the glasses I used to fake my bad eyesight and put them in my pocket. The old man act was over. "What is going on?" Bill Robert asked, sitting behind his desk, his eyes darting from my muddy shoes to my face. "Brandon, your son. He manages the trust now. He comes in here every week. He says you are, well, he says you are not lucid. Brandon is a liar, Robert." I said, my voice calm and precise. "And Brandon is a thief. But today Brandon is going to be a pauper." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the documents Leo had prepared. I slid them across the desk. "This is a notarized revocation of trust," I said. "As the primary grantor, I am dissolving the Carter Family Trust effective immediately. I am reclaiming full legal title to all assets. This is a freeze order for all subsidiary accounts linked to my Social Security number. And this," I tapped the third document, "this is a request for immediate liquidity." Robert picked up the papers. His hands were shaking. He was a banker. He knew what these documents meant. He knew the devastation they represented. "Bill, this is the nuclear option," he whispered, reading the freeze order. "If I execute this, everything stops. The mortgage on the Seattle house, the car leases, the business lines of credit, Brandon's payroll. It all bounces. Today." "That is the point," I said. He looked up at me. "Does he know? He thinks I am feeding pigeons in the park," I said. "He is currently preparing to buy a Porsche on a live stream. I want the card to decline while the camera is rolling, Robert. Can you do that for me?" Robert swallowed hard. He looked at the computer screen. He typed in his credentials. He accessed the main vault ledger. "I can do it," he said. "You have the authority. But Bill, the withdrawal request. $4.5 million. We don't keep that kind of cash on site. You know that." "I know," I said. "I do not want it all in cash. I am not a drug lord." I leaned forward, opening the aluminum briefcase. It was empty save for the foam lining. "I want $200,000 in cash," I said. "Used bills, non-sequential. Pack them in here. I want the rest. 4.3 million. Wired immediately to this IBAN number." I handed him a slip of paper with the Swiss account details. "And Robert," I continued, "I want you to close the overdraft protection first. I want the account to hit absolute zero. I want the balance to be exactly $1. "Why $1? He asked, typing furiously. "So he knows I didn't just empty it," I said. "So he knows I left him a tip." Robert hit the enter key. I watched his face. I saw the reflection of the screen in his glasses. I saw the progress bar. Transferring funds. Somewhere in the digital ether, electrons were moving. Wealth was shifting. The foundation of my son's life was dissolving into binary code and flying across the Atlantic Ocean to a server in Zurich. "Done," Robert said, his voice hollow. "The wire is initiated. It will clear in 30 minutes. "Now the cards," I said. He navigated to the Credit Services tab. "I see 5 cards," he said. 1 Platinum Amex, 1 Visa signature, 3 debit cards linked to the checking. "Cut them," I said. "All of them. Mark them as stolen. Mark them as fraudulent. Flag his credit report." Robert hesitated. "Bill, if I flag them as fraudulent, the credit bureaus will lock him out of everything. He won't be able to rent a car. He won't be able to get a hotel room. He will be radioactive." "He stole $50,000 from me to pay a forger, Robert," I said. "He forged my signature on medical documents. He tried to have me committed." Robert's face hardened. He hit the keys. Click, click, click. Terminated. Status code red. "It is done," he said. We sat in silence for a moment. The room felt different. Lighter. The money was gone. The chains were broken. "I need the cash now, Robert," I said. "And I need the back exit." "The truck is waiting." He nodded. He picked up his phone and dialed the vault. "Prepare a withdrawal package," he said into the receiver. 200,000. Large denominations. "Bring it to my office. Now." 5 minutes later, 2 vault clerks entered with trays of cash. They stacked the bundles into my aluminum briefcase. It fit perfectly. The weight was substantial. It was the weight of freedom. I snapped the latches shut. I spun the combination lock. Robert walked me to the private elevator that led to the loading dock. "Bill," he said as the doors opened. "Where will you go, "I am going to live, Robert," I said. "For the first time in 40 years. I stepped into the elevator. I did not shake his hand. This was business. When the doors opened on the ground level, the armored truck was there. It was a massive black beast of a vehicle, engine idling, exhaust rumbling. 2 guards with shotguns stood by the rear doors. They were not bank security. They were private military contractors hired by Leo. They saw me. They saw the briefcase. They did not ask questions. One of them opened the side door. "Mr. Carter," he asked. I nodded. "Get in, sir. We have a schedule to keep." I climbed into the back of the armored truck. It smelled of gun oil and diesel. There were no windows, just thick steel walls. As the truck pulled away into the Seattle traffic, I looked at my watch. It was 11:30 a.m. In 30 minutes, the wire would clear in Switzerland. In 2 hours, Brandon would walk into the Porsche dealership. I sat in the dark holding the briefcase on my lap, and for the first time since my wife died, I laughed. It started as a chuckle low in my throat and grew into a roar that echoed off the steel walls. I laughed until tears ran down my face, washing away the dirt I had rubbed there. I was rich. I was free. And the check was about to come due. The armored truck rumbled to a halt at the curb of the International Departures Terminal at SeaTac. The back doors swung open with a heavy mechanical groan, revealing the gray drizzle of the Seattle afternoon. The light hurt my eyes for a moment after the darkness of the steel box. One of the guards, a man with a scar on his chin, hopped out and offered me a hand. I took it. My grip was firm. I was done being the frail old man who needed help down the stairs. I stepped onto the pavement, clutching the aluminum Halliburton case that contained my freedom. "Thank you, gentlemen," I said, reaching into my pocket and handing them each a thick envelope of cash. They nodded, stoic and professional, then slammed the doors shut and drove away, leaving me standing amidst the hustle of travelers dragging their luggage. I stood out. I looked like a vagrant who had wandered too far from the city center. My windbreaker was stained with basement mold. My shoes were scuffed. My face was unshaven. People gave me a wide berth, clutching their bags tighter as they hurried past. They saw a threat. They saw a failure. I walked through the automatic sliding doors into the warmth of the terminal. I did not head for the economy line. I walked straight to the Swiss International Airlines first-class check-in counter. The red carpet was empty. The agent, a woman with impeccable makeup and a scarf tied perfectly around her neck, looked up as I approached. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to security, likely assessing if she needed to press a panic button. "Sir," she said, her voice tight. "This line is for first-class passengers only." I did not say a word. I simply placed my passport on the counter. Inside it was the printed boarding pass Leo had arranged. She picked it up gingerly as if it were contaminated. She scanned it. Her screen beeped. She looked at the monitor, then back at me. Her eyes widened. The dismissal in her face evaporated, replaced by a flustered confusion. "Mr. Carter," she stammered. I apologize. We were not expecting—" I know I interrupted. "I have had a rough week. I would like to check my bag." I lifted the aluminum briefcase onto the scale. "Actually," I said, "I will carry this on. It contains sensitive documents." "Of course, sir," she said, typing furiously. "You have access to the Senator Lounge. It is through security and to the left. They have showers and a dining area." "Thank you," I said. I took my boarding pass and walked toward the security checkpoint. I felt the eyes of the people in the long economy line burning into my back. They were wondering how the homeless man had skipped the queue. They didn't know that the homeless man had just bought his life back. Security was a breeze. The TSA agent raised an eyebrow at the cash in the briefcase, but when I produced the bank withdrawal receipt stamped an hour ago, he let me pass. Money is the ultimate passport. It explains everything, even things that look suspicious. I walked into the Senator Lounge. It was a sanctuary of quiet luxury. Soft jazz played in the background. The smell of fresh espresso and expensive cologne filled the air. I went straight to the concierge. "I need a shower," I said, "and I need a razor." 30 minutes later, I emerged from the private bathroom suite. The stubble was gone. The dirt from the window well was scrubbed from my skin. I had thrown the moldy windbreaker and the frayed flannel shirt into the trash. I was wearing the clothes I had packed in my small bag, a clean white Oxford shirt, and a pair of dark slacks I had saved from my working days. They were a little loose. I had lost weight on Megan's starvation diet, but they were clean. They were dignified. I sat in a leather armchair by the window overlooking the tarmac. I watched the massive Boeing 777 being fueled. That machine was going to take me 5,000 miles away from the damp basement, from the prime rib bones, from the sun who threw water in my face. I ordered a glass of Pinot Noir. The waitress brought it on a silver tray with a bowl of warm nuts. I took a sip. It was rich, velvety, and tasted of earth and fruit. It tasted like civilization. I checked my watch. 1:55 p.m. The wire transfer had cleared an hour ago. The accounts were empty. The freeze order was active. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had kept it off since I left the house, but now I needed to see. I needed to know. I turned it on. The screen lit up. It flooded with missed calls. Brandon. Megan. Brandon again. And then the notifications started. It began as a vibration, a small buzz against my palm. Then another. Then a steady rhythmic pulsing as the banking app on my phone struggled to keep up with the cascade of failures occurring in real time across the city. Alert transaction declined. Merchant Porsche Center, Seattle. Amount $50,000. Reason insufficient funds. Account frozen. I took another sip of wine. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. Brandon standing in the showroom, the camera crew rolling the bright lights reflecting off the hood of the car he thought he owned. He would be handing the card over with a flourish. He would be smiling that shark smile. And then the silence. The confusion. The second try. The phone buzzed again. Alert transaction declined. Merchant Nordstrom Rack. Amount $450. Reason card reported stolen. Megan. She must have gone shopping after brunch, trying to soothe her nerves about the basement standoff. She was probably standing at the register holding a bag of shoes, her card rejected in front of a line of people. Buzz. Alert auto payment failed. Merchant Seattle City Light. Reason account closed. Buzz. Alert auto payment failed. Merchant Comcast Xfinity. Reason account closed. The utilities, the internet, the lights, the systems that kept their comfortable life running were shutting down one by one, dominoes falling in a line that ended at my feet. My phone began to ring. It was Brandon. I looked at the screen. I saw his face, the photo I had taken years ago when he graduated college, smiling and hopeful before the greed rotted him from the inside out. I did not answer. I let it ring. It stopped, then rang again immediately. He was panic calling. He was standing in the dealership, sweating, realizing that the envelope I gave him was full of trash, realizing that his father wasn't a senile old fool, but a ghost who had just walked through the walls and taken everything. I watched the phone vibrate on the marble table next to my wine glass. It was a violent, angry dance. Then a text message appeared. Dad. What did you do? The card is not working. Where is the money? I smiled. I did not type back. I did not need to. The silence was my answer. The empty account was my answer. The $1 balance I had left him was my answer. Flight LX41 to Zurich is now boarding Group 1. The announcement came over the loudspeaker, soft and polite. I picked up the aluminum briefcase. I finished the last drop of wine. I stood up. My phone was still buzzing. Megan was calling now. I pressed the side button, silencing the ringer. I walked to the gate. The agent scanned my boarding pass. It beeped green. Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter. I walked down the jet bridge. The tunnel was cool and quiet. I stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant greeted me by name and took my jacket. I settled into seat 1A. It was a pod, a private cocoon of leather and wood. I looked out the window. The rain was still falling on Seattle, washing the city gray. Somewhere out there in a showroom or a driveway, my son was screaming. Somewhere out there, his world was ending. I reclined the seat. I felt the engines start, a low, powerful thrum that vibrated through the floor. We began to move. I reached for my phone one last time. I didn't look at the new messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I simply swiped down the menu and tapped the airplane icon. The signal cut off. The buzzing stopped. The connection to Brandon, to Megan, to the basement, to the hunger, to the cold was severed. The plane accelerated down the runway, pushing me back into the seat. We lifted off, breaking through the clouds into the blinding, brilliant sunlight above. I was flying. I was gone. And I wasn't looking back. The showroom of the Porsche Center in downtown Seattle was a temple of glass and polished concrete, designed to make you feel inadequate the moment you walked through the doors, unless you possessed the correct type of plastic in your wallet. The air smelled of tire rubber and expensive espresso. In the center of the floor, bathed in the glow of halogen spotlights, sat the prize. A Porsche 911 GT3 RS in lizard green. It was aggressive. It was loud even when it was standing still. It was the physical manifestation of everything my son Brandon believed he deserved. He had set up his production value for the live stream with the meticulous care of a director filming a blockbuster. 2 tripods were positioned to capture his best angles. A ring light reflected in his eyes, giving him an artificial robotic glint. Megan stood off to the side holding a secondary camera, her face plastered with a smile that looked like it had been drawn on with a Sharpie. She was checking the viewer count on her tablet, mouthing the numbers to him. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. Brandon smoothed the lapels of his royal blue suit, the one he had bought with money stolen from my retirement fund. He looked into the lens of the main camera and flashed his teeth. "What is up, everyone?" he boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "It is your boy Brandon here, CEO of Carter Tech, coming at you live. Today is a big day, a massive day. We have been crushing the markets all quarter, and you know what I always say. You have to reward the grind. You have to feed the beast." He walked around the car, trailing his hand along the spoiler. The sales associate, a man named Julian with a haircut that cost $300 and a watch that cost $10,000, followed him with a patient shark-like smile. Julian thought he had hooked a whale. He thought he was about to close a $300,000 commission. He had brought out the sparkling water. He had cleared the floor. He treated Brandon like a king because Brandon acted like an emperor. "I am not leasing today," Brandon announced to the camera, winking at his 50,000 viewers. "Leasing is for people who do not understand equity. We are buying. Cash on the barrel. Full ownership. Because that is how we do it at Carter Tech. We own our destiny." The comments on the screen were scrolling so fast, they were a blur of emojis. Fire icons, rocket ships, people worshipping the illusion of success. Brandon fed on it. He grew taller. He grew louder. He turned to Julian. "Wrap it up," he said, snapping his fingers. "I want to drive it out of here in 20 minutes. I have a dinner reservation at Canlis." Julian nodded, bowing slightly. "Of course, Mr. Carter. We have the paperwork ready in the finance office. We just need the initial deposit and the balance transfer authorization. 50,000 down to secure the title transfer today." Brandon laughed. A loud, arrogant bark. 50,000. "No problem. Let us do it right here. I want my followers to see how easy it is when you reach this level. Bring the terminal to me," Julian signaled to an assistant who scurried over with a wireless card reader. The device was sleek and black. It looked innocent. It was not innocent. It was a judge. It was a jury. And it was about to be an executioner. Brandon reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the platinum card. It was one of the cards Robert, the bank manager, had issued 3 years ago, the one linked directly to the main trust account. The card that had paid for the suit, the watch, the house, and the water he threw in my face. He held it up to the camera. "Black card energy, guys," he said. "Never leave home without it." He handed the card to Julian. Julian took it with two hands, treating it like a religious artifact. He inserted the chip into the reader. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the detailing fans in the back bay. Brandon held his pose, a smile frozen on his face, waiting for the beep of approval, waiting for the receipt that would cement his status as a titan of industry. The machine thought. It processed. It communicated with the server at First Union Bank where Robert Garrison had hit the delete key 2 hours ago. Beep. It was a harsh, flat sound. A dissonant chord in the symphony of Brandon's ego. Julian frowned. He looked at the screen. He pulled the card out and wiped the chip on his sleeve, assuming it was a dust particle. "Chip read error," he muttered. "Apologies, Mr. Carter. The technology is temperamental today." He inserted it again. Brandon laughed nervously, glancing at the camera. "Too much heavy metal in the card, guys. The machine cannot handle the weight of the bank account." The chat filled with laughing emojis. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He looked the part. Beep. The sound was louder this time, more final. Julian pulled the card out. He looked at the small LCD screen. The message was flashing in red letters. Declined. Code 04. Pickup card. Julian's face changed. The professional smile did not disappear, but it became brittle. The warmth evaporated from his eyes, replaced by a cool calculation. "Mr. Carter," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "The transaction was declined." Brandon's smile faltered. He snatched the card back. "Declined? That is impossible. I just transferred funds this morning. It is a glitch. Your machine is broken. Try it again." Julian hesitated. "Sir, running it a third time will lock the terminal. Maybe you should call your bank." "I do not need to call my bank." Brandon shouted, his voice cracking. "I know how much money I have. Just run the damn card. Or bring me another machine. This one is garbage." He looked at the camera. "Bank's right, guys. They freeze you when you try to make big moves. They get scared of the volume." He tried to play it off, but the sweat was starting to bead on his forehead. The comments section was slowing down. The rocket ships were being replaced by question marks. "Is he broke, cringe? Pay the man, Brandon." Julian signaled for a different machine. He wanted the sale. He wanted to believe. He brought a second terminal over. Brandon jammed the card in. He punched in his PIN with aggressive stabs of his finger. Beep. Declined. The silence in the showroom was now heavy, oppressive. The other customers who had been watching from a distance, sensing a celebrity, were now watching with the morbid curiosity of people witnessing a car crash. Megan lowered her camera slightly. "Brandon," she hissed, "use the Visa, the one connected to the business line." Brandon fumbled in his wallet. His hands were shaking now. He pulled out the blue Visa signature card. "This one," he said, tossing it to Julian. "Use this one. The platinum probably has a daily limit I forgot to lift. My mistake. Too many assets to keep track of." Julian took the Visa. He looked at it. He looked at Brandon. The respect was gone. Now there was only suspicion. He inserted the Visa. Beep. Declined. A murmur went through the room. The assistant who had brought the water bottle stepped back, creating distance. Security began to drift closer from the front entrance. The comments section on the live stream was now a waterfall of mockery. "Card declined, LMAO. Fake. Rental suit, rental life. He is broke, guys." Brandon saw the comments on the monitor Megan was holding. His face turned a deep, blotchy red. "Stop filming," he snapped at her. "No, do not stop filming." Megan retorted, her voice rising in panic. We have to prove this is a mistake. If we cut the feed now, they will think we are frauds. Fix it, Brandon. Call the bank. Put them on speaker. Show them. Brandon grabbed his phone. He dialed the VIP concierge line for First Union Bank. He put it on speakerphone, holding it up to the camera microphone. Watch this, he told his audience, his eyes wide and manic. Watch me fire the banker who messed this up. You do not mess with my liquidity. The phone rang once, twice. Then a human voice answered. Not the VIP concierge, a general operator. First Union Bank Fraud Department. This is Stacy. How can I help you? Fraud Department. Brandon froze. I am not calling fraud. I am calling the private client line. I am William Brandon Carter. Sir, the operator said, her voice amplifying through the showroom. Your accounts have been flagged for suspicious activity and immediate liquidation. All cards have been reported stolen by the primary account holder. Primary account holder. Brandon stammered. I am the primary account holder. I am the trustee. One moment, sir, let me check the file. The waiting music played. It was a cheerful, tinny tune that sounded like a clown car entering a circus. Brandon looked at Julian. Julian was holding the Porsche keys tight in his hand, moving them away from Brandon. Sir Julian said, his voice ice cold. I am going to have to ask you to step away from the vehicle. What Brandon said. I am buying it. I am on the phone right now. You are not buying anything, Sir Julian said. And your credit check just came back. It was flagged. You have a freeze on your social security number. We cannot process a lease. We cannot process a loan. We cannot even sell you a keychain. The operator came back on the line. Sir, are you there? Yes, I am here, Brandon screamed at the phone. What is going on? I have the file here, the operator said calmly. The primary grantor. Mr. William Carter appeared in person at the main branch today at 11 a.m. He executed a full revocation of the trust and a withdrawal of all funds. The current balance on your linked checking account is $1. $1. The words hung in the air. Brandon dropped the phone. It hit the polished concrete floor with a crack. $1. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was unreadable. It was a blur of laughter, insults, and the digital equivalent of rotting fruit being thrown at a stage. $1. The dad took it back. Scammer gets scammed. Game over. Megan let out a scream. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of fury. She threw the camera equipment onto the floor. The lens shattered. You idiot, she shrieked at Brandon in front of everyone. You told me it was handled. You told me the old man signed the papers. He did. Brandon whispered, staring at his hands. He signed them. I saw him. He played you. Megan yelled, pushing him in the chest. He played you like a fiddle. He emptied the accounts, Brandon. We have nothing. My cards. Try my cards. She scrambled for her purse, pulling out her own stack of plastic. She ran to Julian, shoving a card into his face. Try this one. It is my personal account. Julian stepped back, disgusted. Ma'am, please. Try it, she screamed. He took it. He swiped it. Declined. Of course it was declined. Her account was a subsidiary of the main trust. I had cut the cord. Julian motioned to the security guards. Get them out, he said. Now. Two large men in blazers grabbed Brandon by the arms. He went limp. He was in shock. He was looking at the Porsche, looking at the green paint that he would never touch again. Do not touch me, he mumbled. Do not touch me. I am rich. I am Brandon Carter. You are trespassing, the guard said, dragging him toward the door. Megan followed, stumbling in her heels, grabbing her broken camera equipment, the comments still scrolling on the cracked screen mocking her. They were hauled out onto the sidewalk. The glass doors slid shut behind them, locking them out of the paradise they thought they owned. The rain had started again. It soaked Brandon's blue suit. It ruined Megan's hair. They stood on the street corner, two people who had everything 3 hours ago and now had exactly $1 between them. Brandon looked at his phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. He saw the notification from the bank app. Balance $1, and then he saw the voicemail icon. A new message. From me. He did not play it. Not yet. He just stared at the street as the reality of the empty basement, the toaster manual, and the water he had thrown in my face came crashing down on him with the weight of a collapsing building. He screamed. It was a primal sound, a sound of total loss. He kicked the planter outside the showroom, shattering the terracotta pot. Inside the showroom, Julian signaled the cleaning crew. "Clean this up," he said, pointing to the spot where Brandon had stood. "And disinfect the door handles." The live stream finally cut off as the battery on Megan's tablet died, plunging their digital audience into darkness, leaving only the memory of their ruin. The silence in the dealership was thick enough to choke on. The only sound was the heavy breathing of my son and the faint, cheerful ringback tone echoing from his smartphone, which he held out in front of him like a holy relic. He had put it on speaker. Of course he had. Even in the middle of a catastrophe, Brandon could not resist the urge to perform. He wanted Julian to hear the apology. He wanted Megan to hear the vindication. He wanted the 50,000 people watching the black screen of the live stream to hear the bank beg for his forgiveness. He was so certain that this was a mistake. He was so certain that the universe would never dare to inconvenience him. "Connect," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead and dripping onto the collar of the royal blue suit that he had bought with my retirement savings. "Pick up the phone." A click. Then a voice. Professional. Detached. The voice of an institution that does not care about your feelings. First Union Bank Executive Services, this is Jonathan. How may I assist you today? Brandon exploded. It was a release of pressure that had been building since the first card declined. "Listen to me, Jonathan," he screamed, his voice cracking. "This is William Brandon Carter. I am the CEO of Carter Tech. I am standing in a Porsche dealership, and your incompetent system just declined my card 3 times. 3 times. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Fix it. Fix it right now, or I will have your job. I will pull every dime out of your bank and burn it on the sidewalk." I could imagine the scene on the other end of the line. Jonathan sitting in a cubicle in a call center, probably rolling his eyes, tapping his keyboard with a practiced rhythm. He was not afraid of Brandon. He dealt with men like Brandon every day, men who thought volume was a substitute for solvency. "Sir, please lower your voice," Jonathan said, calm as a frozen lake. "I need to verify your identity. Can you please state the last 4 digits of your social security number and your mother's maiden name?" Brandon shouted the numbers. He shouted my wife's name. He paced in a tight circle, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Megan stood frozen in the corner, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with the dawning horror. She knew. Deep down in the lizard part of her brain, she knew what was coming. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Jonathan said. "I have the account open in front of me. I see the attempted transactions at the Porsche Center." "You see them," Brandon yelled. "Good. Now unblock them. Remove the fraud hold. I authorize the charge. I authorize everything. Just make the card work." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Sir Jonathan replied. "What do you mean you cannot do it?" "I am the trustee. It is my money." "That is incorrect, sir." The 3 words hung in the air. Time seemed to stop in the showroom. Julian the salesman took a half step back, his face hardening into a mask of contempt. "Excuse me," Brandon whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of him. "You are listed as a secondary authorized user on the account." Jonathan explained, his voice amplified by the speakerphone echoing off the glass walls. "You are not the primary account holder. The trust was revocable, and the primary grantor exercised his right to revoke it this morning." Brandon stopped pacing. He stared at the phone as if it had turned into a snake. "Revoke," he stammered. "Who? Who revoked it?" "Mr. William Carter," Jonathan said. "He appeared in person at our main Seattle branch at 11 a.m. today. He provided notarized documentation dissolving the Carter family trust and removing all authorized users." My dad, Brandon, laughed a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "That is impossible. My dad is... He is confused. He is senile. He does not even know what day it is. He gave me the paperwork this morning. He signed everything over to me. I have the envelope right here." He patted his jacket pocket, where the envelope full of toaster instructions still rested. "I cannot speak to what paperwork you believe you have," Sir Jonathan said. "But Mr. Carter was verified by our branch manager, Mr. Garrison. He was lucid. He was specific. And he was very thorough." Brandon looked at Megan. She was shaking her head slowly, backing away from him as if he were radioactive. Okay, Brandon said, his voice trembling. "Fine." He threw a tantrum. He locked the cards. "Whatever. I will deal with him later. Just tell me the balance. I will write a check. I will transfer it to my personal account. How much is in the main fund?" He needed a number. He needed a lifeline. He needed to hear that the $4.5 million was still there, just out of reach. "I am looking at the transaction history." "Now," Jonathan said. "There was a wire transfer initiated at 11:15 a.m. "A transfer," Brandon whispered. "To where?" "To an international account. Switzerland, I believe." "How much?" Brandon screamed. "How much did he move?" "All of it, sir." The floor seemed to tilt. Brandon grabbed the roof of the green Porsche to steady himself, leaving a sweaty handprint on the pristine paint. "All of it," he choked out. "The entire liquid balance of $4,522,318, Jonathan recited, plus the closing of the investment positions." So what is left?" Brandon asked. He sounded like a child, a lost child in a dark wood. Sir Jonathan said, and for the first time there was a hint of something else in his voice. Maybe pity. Maybe amusement. "The current available balance in the checking account is $1. $1. The words slammed into Brandon like a physical blow. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the tile floor, but the connection held. $1, Jonathan's voice continued from the floor, tinny and distant. "Mr. Carter left a note on the file regarding the remaining balance. Would you like me to read it?" Brandon did not answer. He could not breathe. He was gasping for air, clawing at his tie. Megan stepped forward. She looked down at the phone. "Read it," she hissed. "The note says..." Jonathan paused, clearing his throat. "It says, buy yourself a soda, son. Do not choke on it." The line went dead. Silence reclaimed the showroom. Absolute, crushing silence. Then the laughter started. It didn't come from the room. It came from the tablet Megan was still clutching. The battery hadn't died yet. The stream was still live. The audio from the phone call had been broadcast to 50,000 people. The chat was a blur of mockery. The emojis were relentless. Laughing faces, skulls, clowns. $1. Daddy took the black card away. Owned. Best stream ever. Brandon looked at the tablet. He saw the world laughing at him. He saw his reputation incinerating in real time. Julian stepped forward. He wasn't smiling anymore. He signaled to the two large security guards standing by the door. Mr. Carter, Julian said, his voice dripping with ice. I am going to have to ask you to leave, and we will be needing to sanitize the vehicle where you touched it. Brandon looked at his hand. He looked at the car. Almost. He looked at Megan. Megan looked back at him with eyes that were black holes of hatred. She didn't see her husband. She didn't see a CEO. She saw a fraud. She saw a man who had promised her the world and delivered a $1 balance. You idiot, she screamed. You absolute useless idiot! She threw the tablet at him. It missed his head and shattered against the wall. Brandon fell to his knees. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stared at the floor, at the phone that had delivered his death sentence. $1, he whispered. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the envelope I had given him that morning. He tore it open with frantic, trembling fingers. He poured the contents onto the floor. Instruction manuals. Warranty cards for a toaster oven. A diagram of how to insert the crumb tray. He picked up the diagram. He stared at it. And then he started to laugh. It was a broken, jagged sound. The sound of a man whose mind has just snapped under the weight of reality. He laughed and laughed, surrounded by the wreckage of his ego, while the security guards grabbed him by the arms and began to drag him toward the exit. The Uber ride back to the mansion was a silent, suffocating journey of wet clothes and terror. Brandon and Megan did not speak. They could not. The driver dropped them at the curb of the house they no longer owned effectively. They ran up the driveway, the rain plastering their hair to their skulls. Brandon fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them twice before managing to unlock the front door. They burst into the foyer. It was quiet. The house felt different. It felt hollow. "Where is he?" Brandon screamed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Where is the old thief?" He did not wait for an answer. He sprinted to the basement door. The heavy chair he had dragged in front of it to trap me was gone, pushed aside. The deadbolt was unlocked. He threw the door open and thundered down the wooden stairs, Megan right behind him. "Dad! Come out here right now," he yelled. But his voice just bounced off the concrete walls. The basement was empty. The metal cot was stripped bare. The thin mattress rolled up neatly. The folding table was clear. The computer tower in the corner was dark and cold. Brandon spun around wildly, looking for a hiding spot, looking for the huddled figure of the father he thought he controlled. He saw the window well above the crates. The glass pane removed the wet grass blowing in. "He is gone," Megan whispered. She walked to the center of the room. She looked at the mini fridge. It was open and empty. She looked at the corner where my small bag of clothes used to be. Gone. "He escaped," Brandon said. "He escaped and he went to the bank." "How? How did he get out?" He walked over to the table. There was a single object left behind. It was the plastic digital watch he had bought me at the drugstore, the cheap $5 piece of junk I had worn for 3 years. It was sitting in the center of the table, ticking loudly in the silence. Beside it was his own cell phone, the one he had smashed in the dealership. It was buzzing. Not a notification. A call. He picked it up. The screen was spider-webbed with cracks, but the caller ID was visible through the glass shards. "Dad." Brandon stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the answer button. He looked at Megan. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. He swiped the screen. He put the phone to his ear. "You," he breathed. "You old... Where are you?" I sat in the first-class lounge at SeaTac, swirling the last of my Pinot Noir. The leather chair was soft. The air was warm. I watched the rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling windows, soundproofed against the roar of the jet engines outside. "Hello, son," I said calmly. "I assume you are in the basement. How is the temperature down there?" "Bring it back," Brandon screamed. "Bring it back right now, every cent. I will call the police. I will tell them you stole it. I will tell them you are senile and you tricked the bank." "You can call the police, Brandon," I said, taking a sip of wine. "In fact, you will not have to. They are already on their way." "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the USB drive I pulled from your computer, son. I am talking about the folder labeled tax docs. I am talking about the $50,000 wire transfer to Paul Hayes, the forger." There was a silence on the line, a heavy, thick silence. I could hear his breathing stop. You looked at my computer." "I audited your computer," I corrected him, "and I found some very interesting discrepancies. Money laundering is a federal crime, Brandon. So is conspiracy to commit fraud, and forging medical documents to institutionalize a parent that is a special kind of felony." "You are lying," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew what was on that drive. "I sent the packet to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division this morning." I continued, my voice steady and cold. "I also CC'd the local FBI field office regarding the forgery ring. They seemed very interested. I imagine they are pulling into your driveway right about now." "No." Brandon moaned. "No, Dad, please. We can fix this. Just send me enough to leave. Send me enough to run." "Run where, son? Your passport is in the safe upstairs. And I believe the house is currently being seized as a criminal asset." Megan snatched the phone from him. "William, listen to me," she shrieked. "You cannot do this. We are family. I am your daughter-in-law." "You are a woman who cut off my water, Megan," I said. "You are a woman who kicked my food under the table. You are not family. You are a bad investment." I just wrote off. "William, please," she began to sob. "Save your tears," I said. "You are going to need them for the jury." I checked the departure board. My flight was boarding. "I have to go now," I said. "My flight is leaving." "Flight?" Brandon asked, his voice distant, coming from the background. "Where are you going?" "The state home." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "No, son. I am not going to the state home. I am going to the Alps. I am going to eat chocolate and look at the mountains and sleep in a bed with high thread count sheets. I am retiring, Brandon, with my money. And you," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper, "you are going to prison." I hung up the phone. I did not just end the call. I removed the SIM card from the device and dropped it into my glass of wine. I watched it sink to the bottom, red liquid swirling around the tiny chip. I stood up. I picked up my aluminum briefcase. I walked to the gate. Back in the basement, Brandon stared at the dead phone. He looked at Megan. She was slumped against the concrete wall, weeping into her hands. Then they heard it. The sound I had promised. Sirens. Not one siren. Many. They were getting louder, coming up the street, getting closer to the house that was no longer theirs. Brandon looked at the window, the small square of gray light that had been my only view for 3 years. He ran to it. He climbed up on the crates, desperate to see. He looked out. Blue and red lights flashed against the rain. Black SUVs with government plates were blocking the driveway. Men in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back were stepping out. FBI. IRS. They were coming to the front door. Brandon dropped back down to the floor. He looked at the basement around him. The cold, the damp, the darkness. He realized then that I hadn't escaped the prison. I had just traded places with him. He sat on my cot, the metal springs creaking under his weight, and waited for the heavy boots to come down the stairs. The heavy oak front door of the mansion, the one Brandon had spent $10,000 refinishing to impress his guests, did not stand a chance against the federal battering ram. I was 30,000 feet in the air, sipping champagne when it happened, but I can see it as clearly as if I were standing in the foyer. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house, shattering the silence that had settled over the empty rooms. Brandon was still in the basement, huddled on my old cot, when he heard the crash upstairs. He flinched, curling into a ball. He knew what that sound meant. It was the sound of consequences arriving at terminal velocity. He heard the heavy boots on the hardwood floor above. A dozen pairs. Tactical gear. The shouting was precise and coordinated. Federal agents. Clear left. Clear right. Secure the perimeter. Megan screamed. She had been trying to hide in the laundry room, trying to delete photos from her phone, trying to distance herself from the man she had married for money that no longer existed. They found her in seconds. An agent kicked the door open, and she scrambled backward, knocking over a bottle of bleach that spilled across the tile, a white puddle spreading like her fear. "I didn't do anything," she shrieked, her hands raised. "It was him. It was Brandon. He forced me. I am a victim here." They did not listen. They did not care about her tears. They cuffed her hands behind her back, zip ties cutting into her wrists. They dragged her out into the hallway, past the expensive art on the walls that was already being tagged as evidence. Down in the basement, Brandon heard them coming for him. He stood up. He tried to straighten his ruined suit. He tried to summon the arrogance that had carried him through life for 32 years. But when the basement door flew open and the flashlight beams cut through the darkness, he was just a terrified boy standing in the damp. "Brandon Carter," an agent shouted, leveling a weapon at him. "Hands where I can see them." Brandon raised his hands. He was shaking. "My father," he stammered. "My father stole the money. He is the one you want. He is running away. I can help you find him." The lead agent walked down the stairs. He was a man I used to work with, a man named Miller, who had zero patience for white-collar criminals who preyed on the elderly. He looked at Brandon. He looked at the squalid conditions of the basement, the thin mattress, the unplugged fridge, the bucket in the corner. "We received the packet from your father," Mr. Carter, Miller said, his voice cold. "We know exactly where the money went. We know about the shell companies in Cyprus. We know about the forgery ring. And we know about the elder abuse." He spun Brandon around and slammed him against the concrete wall. The handcuffs clicked shut. It was a metal sound, final and unforgiving. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller said, dragging him toward the stairs. "And I suggest you use it because your father gave us enough evidence to put you away until you are gray." They hauled him up the stairs. They marched him through the house he had defiled. Out on the front lawn, the neighbors had gathered. The same neighbors Brandon had snubbed for years. The same neighbors who had watched his live streams with envy. Now they watched with phones in hand, recording the downfall. The rain was still falling. Brandon was shoved into the back of a black SUV. He looked out the window and saw Megan being loaded into a separate car. She was screaming at him, spitting venom, blaming him for the ruin of her life. He looked at the house. He saw an agent placing a padlock on the front door. It was over. The empire of lies had collapsed. He leaned his head against the cold glass of the police car and closed his eyes. But he could not shut out the image of the water he had thrown in my face. It was the most expensive glass of water in history. 6 months later, the air in the Swiss Alps is crisp and tastes of pine and snow. It is a clean taste. I sit on the terrace of a small chalet overlooking Lake Zurich. The morning sun hits the water, turning it into a sheet of diamonds. On the table in front of me is a pot of rich dark coffee, a basket of fresh bread, and a block of high-quality chocolate. I am wearing a thick wool sweater. I am warm. I am full. I pick up my tablet and scroll through the news from back home. The trial was short. The evidence I provided was forensic and irrefutable. Brandon's defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer because he could not afford private counsel, tried to argue that he was coerced, but the jury did not buy it. Not after they saw the photos of the basement. Not after they saw the bank statements. The headline reads, Tech CEO sentenced to 12 years for fraud and elder abuse. 12 years. He will be 44 when he gets out. He will have nothing. No money, no reputation, no friends. I scroll down. There is a smaller article about Megan. She took a plea deal. She testified against Brandon to reduce her sentence. She got 2 years probation and community service. The last report says she is working as a janitor at a shopping mall in Tacoma, trying to pay off the restitution order. She spends her days cleaning up other people's messes. It seems fitting. I put the tablet down. I do not feel joy reading this. I do not feel a thrill of victory. I feel a quiet, heavy peace. The anger that fueled me for those 3 days in the basement has evaporated, leaving behind a calm clarity. I did what I had to do. I cut out the rot so the rest of the tree could survive. A waiter approaches my table. He is young, polite, and respectful. More coffee, Mr. Carter, he asks. Yes, please, Hans, I say. And bring the bill. There is no rush, sir, he says, pouring the steaming liquid. Take your time. The view is beautiful today. It is. It is magnificent. I look out at the mountains. I think about my wife, Sarah. I think she would be sad about Brandon, but I think she would be proud of me. I stood up. I fought back. I reclaimed the dignity they tried to steal. I am alone here, but I am not lonely. I have made friends in the village. I play chess on Tuesdays. I hike on Thursdays. I eat when I am hungry. I sleep when I am tired. I answer to no one. I raise my coffee cup in a silent toast to the mountains. They thought I was a fire that had burned out. They thought they could douse me with a glass of water and sweep away the ash. They forgot that water only makes a grease fire explode. I take a sip of coffee. It is hot. It is sweet. I am William Carter. I am 67 years old, and my life is just beginning. We often cling to the idea that family is sacred, enduring disrespect under the guise of loyalty. But as I sat on that terrace in Zurich, I realized that true family is built on gratitude, not entitlement. You can sacrifice everything for a child, yet you cannot force them to be good. My journey wasn't just about reclaiming millions. It was about reclaiming the self-worth I allowed them to erode. The most powerful thing you can do is show people that your kindness has a limit, and once crossed, the consequences are irreversible. Never set yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. If you believe that respect must be earned, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice, and tell me in the comments, what is the one line your family must never cross?